Welcome to a special episode of Sitting with Shay J in recognition of National Suicide Prevention Month. Today's conversation is focused on breaking the stigma around mental health, particularly in communities of color. Joining me today is the Colorado Youth Advisory Council, Keyshawn, Kennedy, and Kim. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I think this conversation is necessary. Keyshawn, as the youth president of YAC, can you tell me why it is so important that we address this conversation about suicide, especially in communities of color?
Well, I want to get personal and say I lost my friend due to suicide, and he was one of the strongest people I knew, and I didn't really know, you never really know. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things that you just never really know.
Wow. That's real. I'm watching our community have so much suicide happening amongst us and in our community. And so when you say losing a friend and not knowing, I tell people all the time, the signs are not always clear. So I think this is why we have these conversations. Kennedy, when you think about marginalized communities and sometimes we're not able to speak up, how has this being a part of YAC helped you speak up and talk about mental health and talk about the awareness of this?
I would say it's helping me like a lot. Because I have people that look like me that I can also talk to. Yeah. And it doesn't get me back in that mind space of being suicidal. Because I have been feeling suicidal before. Mm-hmm. And my friend actually did kill himself through suicide. So.
Wow. Yeah, so now you're really becoming an advocate for this space, yes. Learning what you have went through and seen with your own eyes. Kim, I know that you're a big part of why YAC is happening. Can you tell us about what it looks like when you think about challenges that you've seen with young people and what they've been facing, and really discussing what this looks like around young people in mental health?
Absolutely. So oftentimes we don't recognize the warning signs because our youth are taught how to mask it, right? We see them with a smile on their face, and so when they're smiling, we don't always know what's in the back of their minds. And so how do we recognize these signs of suicide? Social media plays a huge part in what our kids are going through when they're determining what's their identity, when they're determining do they fit in and do they belong. And so then who do they talk to when they're having all of these different emotions? If they don't have someone that they can turn to, if they don't have a family member that they can talk to, and if they don't have people in their schools that look like them that they can talk to. And so then what do? As a community, we have to work together to figure out the solution to this.
We absolutely do. I don't want to see another young person, anyone, lose anybody else to suicide. Mm-hmm. When you think about the resources and strategies that YAC is providing, what does that look like to really help these young people in the suicide prevention? Right. Whoever wants to speak to that.
So we created a documentary, the youth created a documentary called Voices Unheard. Mm. The feature of the documentary is exactly what Keyshawn just spoke of. It features his friend that died by suicide, right? And we talk about in the documentary the warning signs that we don't often see. Yeah. We also talk about why are our Black youth committing suicide at alarming rates. Just what Keyshawn mentioned, females are committing suicide at rates of 184%.
My God.
It's happening in youth as young as the age of 5, and Black youth are committing suicide at rates higher than our white counterparts. And why is that happening? Right, and so the documentary speaks to that. And then, like I said, it also features his dear friend, who was also one of my students, that died by suicide 3 years ago on September 5th. And so it's a really hard and heavy documentary. And we just did our second screening for that was it last Saturday, Keyshawn? I think it was last. 2 Saturdays ago? On the 14th.
Saturdays,
Okay.
On the 14th. And so we're continuing that conversation on our YAC Facebook page on September 29th. We're doing a Signs of Suicide for Youth at 3 o'clock and a Signs for Suicide for Adults and Community at 6 o'clock. And it's all driven by them, by the youth, by youth for youth, and by youth for community.
I love that because sometimes we need to know we're not alone in that journey.
Absolutely.
You know, that people look like us or struggling like us. Because like you say, a lot of times you put on the brave face, you know, and you're right next to your very best friend one day and the next day they're gone. And we're not even seeing those signs.
Right.
Kennedy, when you think about communities of color and how we're often overlooked, what do you think some of the barriers that keep people from actually seeking help or seeking safe spaces?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, like what do you think stops people from getting the help that they need or telling a friend what they're going through?
Because I would say, like, my brother who died, who committed suicide, his name was Jay. He didn't really tell nobody because first he didn't think nobody would understand him. People would like laugh at him because he's feeling that way. Because like people say that really no boys are supposed to be feeling suicidal. Boys are stronger than that. Yeah. So that's really, I think, why he didn't tell nobody. But he only told me. He wouldn't even tell his parents. So I feel like people are scared of people making fun of them and saying that. Like, for a myth, people are saying that black people are not supposed to feel suicidal. That it's not a black thing.
Wow. Yeah, I know that has to be hard when you look at losing people from that. When we think about these conversations, Kimberly, when it comes to really making sure that YAC is a part of creating culturally competent mental health, what do you think we should be doing to make sure professionals are in spaces that are for us?
So we're seeking out professionals that look like us to have them on our Facebook webinar calls so that we first have exposure, right? Making sure that our youth know that there are mental health professionals out there that do look like us. There might not be them that many in schools. Yeah. So we're going to invite them on our Facebook webinars so that youth can have exposure and see them. And then making sure that parents and adults that are on our webinars can see them too. Yeah. So that even when we get off of the webinars, right, they can have their contact information and go from there.
I love that. For anyone that's at home that's struggling, that knows someone that's struggling, what's a word of advice you would give to them?
For me, I would say suicide is a permanent solution to a very temporary problem. Wow. And it's not the end, you know. It's not the end, you know. Call your friends.
Yeah, I love that. Don't make a permanent decision for a temporary problem. Yeah.
Check up on them.
Check up on them. I love that.
We do have YAC has worked to create an app. The app is similar to the Safe to Tell app. But it's an app that's created by youth, and for community, and it's called The Power of One.
Wow.
You can create we don't want to say a referral because it's a connection, right? And you put in a connection, and we have peer navigators on the other side of that will get you the help that you need.
Yes.
And so if you know a friend, if you know someone that is struggling with suicide, then we'll say download the Power of One app and put in a connection, and a peer navigator will connect with that youth to get them the help and the resources that they need.
Wow, the Youth Advisory Council. Thank you, Keyshawn, Kennedy, and Kimberly. Thank you for sharing your stories. I really appreciate you because we have to break the stigma. We know it's a lot of silence around mental health, but it's crucial that we are here to save lives and really be a part of preventing what can happen to someone else. To our viewers out there, if you know someone who is struggling with mental health, please reach out. There is help. There are resources available, and you are not alone. Stay tuned for more important conversations right here on Sitting with Shay J. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.